In this quick video, what I'd like to do is just offer you some ideas that might help you analyze the source that you're given in History Extension Question 1. So just some general rules that might help you go about thinking about the source analytically. So remember, the general structure is you get an extract, you get a question that you're asked, and you're asked to use the source that you're given and also some of your own sources to bring into the exam. So you need to be prepared to kind of respond to a text you haven't seen. That sometimes we'll discuss some things that are a little bit complicated. So part of the practice of this is looking at your old exams and thinking about what you would actually say. There is an element of this which is just training to think about how you would respond, what other sources would be relevant to discuss to this, discuss in relation to this question, and so on. Okay, so preparation is fundamental for your confidence and your ability in this kind of question. So what do you do then to actually ensure that you're at least starting to analyze the source well and giving yourself something that you could actually discuss in an exam? Here's a couple of things that I think not necessarily out of left field. They're not necessarily anything that you wouldn't, many of you wouldn't be doing already, but perhaps just reaffirming some basic things that you need to start doing. One is that you actually have to think about what the source is claiming about the main theme of the question. So don't just read the source and think, oh, that's an interesting point, that's an interesting point, I'm going to talk about that. If they're not relevant to the question, they shouldn't really be kind of earmarked by you as important points. You really need to read the source in the context of the question. What does it seem to be saying about what the question is asking? Now, sometimes that may not actually be stated explicitly or completely explicitly, okay, but it might be implied. So you need to start drawing some inferences about what it seems to be arguing. So generally speaking, is the source more kind of empiricist, reconstructionist? Does it sort of advocate a von Rankian view of history? Is it more constructionist like E.H. Carr, endorsing more relativist approach? Or is it something deconstructionist that's advocating something more like Keith Jenkins and the postmodernists? What does it seem to kind of advocate about history generally and about the question specifically? So try to think about being able to kind of, in a sense, see where the source might fit in terms of the range of views of history that are out there. And that might be a useful thing as you're setting up your discussion of the source. You might say, so-and-so in source A argues very similarly to someone like E.H. Carr by suggesting that. So you're showing the marker that you know, in a sense, what the source is actually saying. Also, it's important to ask which elements of the source are the most relevant to the question. That's absolutely fundamental. Generally speaking, the source will have been selected so that there are a range of important points that are brought up about history relevant to the question. You in a sense, you need to find some of those. This is not a test to say, have they ticked all of the things that we thought were important. That's not what it's about. It's about being able to identify some very relevant issues of the source and use them to your advantage in developing your essay. So these points might actually then inform part of the structure of your essay, might inform just the basic themes that you're going to address as well. Okay, I think it's also important to think about whether you actually agree with the source. Perhaps completely you might disagree with it. That's a possibility. It's more likely though that you might agree with bits and disagree with others. Okay, what are those bits? Which bits are you going to argue against and challenge? Which bits are you going to, in a sense, perhaps support and endorse? Okay, there might be both in the source that you actually get. So what do you think about the source is really an important question. You're not just being asked to, regurgitate the source, you're being asked to critically evaluate it. Critical evaluation means that you need to actually have an opinion on it, an informed opinion though. And finally, I think it's really important that you also have a look at how other sources that you've analysed, say in class or in your own preparation or all of the above, how they might actually engage with the source that's in front of you on that page and also with the question. So for example, the source might say something that really challenges someone like von Ranke, which means you might bring up von Ranke and say, in contrast to source A, von Ranke would argue this, however, and then you're arguing your point of view. Or it might it might talk about, say, something like the digitization of history. And that might be an important theme of it, in which case you might bring up a source that you've got prepared that allows you to discuss some of those issues around digitization and democratization of history and so on. So you need to actually think about how other sources connect with this source. And this is where your preparation is really critical. By understanding where the source fits into the sort of big spectrum of ideas on history, you can see who would criticize the source, who might endorse it, and then you can begin to think about your ideas as well. So there's that conversation going on between you, the source you're given, and also sources that you have studied and analyzed.